I always wanted to become a police officer. I applied for the New York City Police Academy after completing my graduation, and after 6 months of physical and academic training, I was ready. One day, as I was patrolling the streets of New York with my partner James, a voice came over the radio. We received a code for breaking and entering. My partner had already turned on our patrol lights and we were on our way. I replied over the radio to show us en route while I spot-checked my equipment. It took us about 15 minutes to get to the scene. The place was some abandoned warehouse scheduled to be demolished to make way for a new mall. The place was in the middle of nowhere. We hadn't seen any cars, houses, or anyone for miles. "Who the hell would want to break in here?" I asked my partner. He replied that the better question was, who called this in? He had a point. There was no one around or waiting for us when we got there. We took out our guns as we entered. It was very dark. The only light that illuminated our path were our flashlights and the distant full moon. When we managed to find the main gate to the warehouse, we saw a few feet next to it was a security guard post. I moved toward the guard post to see if anyone was inside. I could smell it before even seeing it. It was blood. The security guard was indeed inside, still sitting in his chair. His face had been clawed off, barely resembling a face at all now. His jaw was nowhere in sight. His insides had been hollowed out, and his one remaining arm was bitten in half. There was blood and chunks of human flesh all over the small cabin. It looked like he had been mauled by a bear, but I've never seen anyone be so utterly destroyed. My partner told me to call for backup, and I couldn't agree more. We started walking back to our vehicle, and I noticed it somehow had gotten even darker since we got to the scene. It looked like clouds had covered the moonlight from shining down. Before I could even process what was going on, something had violently tackled me to the ground. At first I thought it was whatever mauled the security guard, but I could see that it was a man wearing ripped clothes. There was a brief struggle on the ground where he tried to bite me. Just then, James took out his taser and zapped away. I got up and kicked him as hard as I could in the face. I took out my handcuffs and put him under arrest. We picked the guy up and walked over a few feet to where we had parked, only to find another unwanted surprise. Our tires had been slashed in the amount of time we had been gone. I would have blamed our suspect, but the car's bonnet had 4 long, deep scratches over it. It didn't matter how crazy anyone was, they weren't going to be able to do that with your bare hands. We threw the suspect in the back of the vehicle. We then immediately tried to get back up on the radio as we needed immediate assistance. We anxiously awaited a reply, but nothing came. The suspect then said, "You shouldn't have kicked me," and was leaning his face against the division cage. When we asked if he killed the man, he responded, "My friend did it, but you will get it worse." We opened the back of the vehicle and pulled out a pair of shotguns from a duffel bag. We weren't going to let those people hunt us. After a few seconds, somewhere in the distance we could hear a horrendous sound that I could only associate with some kind of roar. I gripped tightly on the shotgun, and I readied myself. Something tells me it might be his friends. Suddenly we heard another roar. This one sounded closer but coming from a completely different direction. We then understood that we were being surrounded. I immediately took cover behind the vehicle. We could hear whatever was out there now. They were close enough that we could make out the sounds of something large and fast, quickly running from places we couldn't see in the darkness. Then all of a sudden, I saw a black blur smashing into James so hard and fast that he flew through the air and landed several feet away from the cover of our vehicle. I sprinted toward him, shooting a few times in the direction I saw that black blur move towards. He didn't need to say much more. Even in darkness, I could see he had landed terribly, and his leg was bent in a way it wasn't meant to. His shotgun was thrown into somewhere in the darkness, so I handed him my shotgun. I got him up, and we could only get a few steps in before we heard another roar of whatever was hunting us. Before any of us could react, we were violently thrown in the air again. I managed to land close to the passenger side of the vehicle, but James wasn't that lucky. A few feet from me, what looked like a massive black werewolf was dragging my partner across the ground. Moments after, it started ripping chunks out of him however way it could. He was somehow still alive through all of that, and was trying to defend himself with one hand by trying to shoot it. Then another werewolf joined in ravaging my partner. The only thing I could manage to do was jump inside the car and lock myself in as the two werewolves finished ripping James apart. The suspect then said, "I told you, you were going to get yours." I aimed my sidearm straight at the suspect's head and responded, "I may not make it out here tonight, but I'll make sure to empty this on your face first." My heart dropped to my stomach as I was pointing my weapon. As soon as the man leaned out of the darkness, he was lit by the moonlight and started laughing like a maniac. The laughter turned into violent convulsions. He had started to go through a transformation.